on a day where I guess Carol gets to smile. Carol, you love Mondays, and at least based on the market action, I guess, well, somebody loves it as well.
I guess so. It's really kind of quiet in general. We are definitely off our lows of the session, a little bit higher across the board, certainly better than what it looked like maybe about an hour or so ago. But I just feel like there's, Tim, kind of wait and see for all the earnings coming this week and the big drop of economic news.
Yeah, so on the economic front, certainly wait to get the jobs report on Friday. Before that, though, we get a lot of companies reporting results. We'll get Amazon and Apple and Microsoft. We'll hear from McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Meta Platforms as well, Visa, UPS, Exxon, and more. Maybe that'll be a catalyst because nothing really was a catalyst today.
Yeah, and as Romaine mentioned earlier, analysts have not really been bringing down their estimates, at least for this quarter. They're still expecting profit growth of, 15% on average for the whole year 2025. I suppose other questions will be, what will they say in terms of their CapEx spending? Will they double down on what they've already promised, or will they be reining it in just a little bit?
I think, too, I just advise all the folks who have a Bloomberg terminal. Gina Martin-Adams, who runs our equity strategy team, she had a great note out kind of previewing this earnings season and really talked about where analyst estimates were. And she talked about how they had come down for a lot of the main sectors in the S&P, with one big exception, and that was in the tech space. In fact, those estimates still relatively elevated given the big sell-off, and that could be a gap that has to be narrowed, either to the upside with earnings coming in better than expected, or to the downside with prices dropping further. On this Monday afternoon, pretty much unchanged across the board, but a big turnaround from where we were earlier in the session when stocks were deep in the red. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing higher by 114 points, or 0.3%. The S&P higher by 3 points, or roughly about 0.1% on the day. The Nasdaq lower by 17 points, or 0.1%, and the Russell 2000 adding about 8 points, or 0.4%.
All right, to the S&P 500 I go. More names in the index, ultimately higher by the closing bell here. About 334 names in the S&P 500. Vonnie, higher. You got about 168 to the downside.
Yeah, it's really interesting because earlier, really, the only green we had on the screen was maybe energy or maybe utilities at one point in the day. Now you're seeing a lot of sectors did manage to crawl back into the green, including utilities, the best performing sector, real estate, energy, healthcare. But again, you have those laggards, and you have to wonder if they won't have an outsized effect on the market this week, and that's information technology and the likes of consumer stocks.
All right, feeling a little greedy, so I've got about 4 names I'm going to go through in terms of gainers. Boeing among them, up about 2.4% at the close. As you know, Airbus agreeing to take over some assets and sites from Spirit Aerosystems. So this essentially clears the way then for Spirit to be acquired by Boeing. We know that that was the plan, Boeing to bring back Spirit to the fold. I should point out Bernstein also upgraded Boeing to outperform, noting that the aircraft maker is now, quote, making the progress it needed for the growth trajectory. So Wall Street analysts weighing in as well. On holding, up about 3.4%. Citi raised the sneaker maker to buy from neutral, saying it's among the best positioned brands to navigate the current uncertain environment and pass on higher costs to consumers if needed. So a standout there. Peloton up more than 5%. Truist Securities upgraded the company to buy, saying the stock is finally nearing a point where the company's improving fundamentals should support a recovery in shares. Keep in mind, stock is down about 25% year to date, but down 96% from its all-time high back in January of 2021. And for something, you want to do some earnings?
Yeah, let's get to some earnings here. Cadence Designs, of course, a software company that's basically used by the chip equipment sector here, reporting revenue in the most recent quarter that came in line with estimates, $1.24 billion. Adjusted EPS did beat $1.57. The street on average was looking for $1.50. And get this, the company actually says it's going to raise its 2025 revenue and EPS outlook. It says revenue will now be in a range of $5.15 to $5.23 billion. Now, that's only slightly above what the street was looking for. Like, we're talking like a few $100,000 here. The EPS, 6.73 to 6.83. The street was looking for 6.65 to 6.75. So I guess a modest vote of confidence here, both in terms of the quarter that just passed and the year up ahead, Carol and Tim. The company actually raising its guidance.
I think that's kind of interesting. Made me look at the supply chain function on the Bloomberg. So Huawei, IBM, LG Electronics, some of its biggest customers. So it makes you wonder, okay, maybe there's some demand for their products and maybe what it says about those businesses. Hey, one last gainer I just want to get to. Ticker is CGON, CG Oncology, and it's about a $2.2 billion market cap cancer drug developer, soaring today, up 25%. Company came out and gave some data for a late-stage trial of its experimental therapy for bladder cancer. So some upbeat news there. And so that one was soaring in today's session. Tim, what do you got?
I got some stocks that were in the red today. I do want to start with shares of NVIDIA. They fell today by 2%, but they were down as much as 4.5% earlier in the session. They were under pressure after this story in the Wall Street Journal that Huawei is getting ready to test a new and powerful AI processor to rival NVIDIA's. We're going to be speaking with Kunjan Sabani just a little bit about what that looks like in just a few minutes. Also on our Markets Live blog, kind of a cautious sign they note at the start of a busy week when 4 of the Mag 7 are set to report earnings. Spotify shares down today by 3.7%. The company, though, has been on an absolute tear. They do report earnings tomorrow. This year, shares are up more than 30%. Last year, they were up 170%. The year before that, up 150%. We did learn today that Spotify paid out more than $100 million to podcast publishers and podcasters worldwide in the first quarter of 2025. But keep an eye out for those earnings to cross tomorrow before the bell. And finally, Roper Technologies industrial manufacturing fell today by 1%. This after the company reported first quarter results and gave an outlook for adjusted second quarter earnings that came in below expectations.
In the yield space, a relatively quiet day both in terms of volume and volatility, but you did see yields drop across the board. Remember, it's been about 3 weeks now where we've seen yields, particularly on the short end, start to drift lower, and that continued to start this week as well. 7 basis points on the shorter end of the curve. That's your 2-year yield, 3.68 and change right now. On the longer end of the curve, your 10-year yield down about 3 basis points, and your 30-year down about 2.
All right, guys, let's get to some of the individual stories that kind of caught our attention today. And
what caught your attention, Carol?
I don't know about you guys, and I don't know about you, Romaine, if you've been playing around with ChatGPT, but Tim and I are kind of obsessed and playing around with it. And apparently OpenAI is going to let users actually go shopping with ChatGPT, kind of a head-on challenge to Google. It's a limited number of categories, but they're going to start letting us all
What do you mean
play
shopping?
around.
Like
So you can... Yeah, you can basically shop for a product, and it's going to take you basically to something that will show you where you can find that particular product.
We've already been doing that.
Yeah, so let me get this straight. So all this trillions of dollars being poured into AI and all this other stuff, and the net result of it is that, what, I can shop?
That's not the only thing you can do, Romaine.
Well, Vonnie, you seem...
It's another service.
Yeah.
Now, we're not at the stage where the robot shops for you.
I was told this was going to change my life.
Okay.
You know,
Wake me up when the robot's there.
I did a little experiment over the weekend. I did ask it to compare some prices for a certain product online. I was buying some new contact lenses over the weekend.
Whoa.
And I asked for the cheapest ones, and it came back.
Cheapest ones.
Was it good?
No, it wasn't accurate.
Oh.
Yeah, I found a better deal somewhere else.
Just one example.
Using an old-fashioned web browser. I do use ChatGPT for a lot of stuff.
Tell them what you did with your son.
So my son's learning how to read. And he gets like a book a week from school that it's really short. And I wanted to find other books that were sort of similar at that reading skill level. And I just asked ChatGPT to write a little story that features characters that are, named after his friends. And it can do that in seconds. And it's something fun that he can do and sort of read along. And it's like a nice, fun way for him to practice reading.
That is very sweet.
Cool.
Although you could have made the story up yourself, Tim, if
You know what you should do, Tim? If you really want to impress him tonight, you should read him at bedtime. There was a letter out by Colonel Archibald Gracie.
No.
Okay.
He was actually a passenger on the Titanic.
Okay.
You remember the Titanic, right?
I do,
And I'm not talking about the movie. I'm talking about the actual ship all the way back there in the early 1900s. April 10th, 1912. That was the first day he was on the ship. It set sail for Southampton, England. And he wrote a letter that was sort of unintentionally ominous, basically saying, hey, it's a fine ship, but I shall await my journey's end before I pass judgment on her. That letter just recently went to auction, and it sold for about $400,000 US.
We'll FaceTime you and have you read the letter.
Okay, sure. I'm sure your son would love that.
But he
He's had nightmares.
survived until towards the end of the year. He was never able to fully recover from the cold that he had experienced. But I'd love to know, did he write a letter after he got off, passing the judgment and saying what he thought?
Yeah, right?
Dark. Sorry.
No, go there. If you think about what he said ahead of time.
Thanks, Beryl. That's really insightful.
It's a Monday. Leave me alone. All right, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals.
Far,
go play
wherever you are. I believe
Wow.
that my
Love your
heart
strings.
will go on.
Wow. What happened
Hope
to
we
you?
have
that
the
in
rights to
key?
that.
Did you have a really good weekend or something?
I did, Carol Massar.
That was touching.
Is he just
Thank
yeah,
you.
I
That's
don't
why
know.
I'm here.
All right, that'll do it. We'll see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.